Hello, my name is Braun. I'm the managing director of Zenon Partners. I have produced 3 short videos about how foreign companies are losing control over their investments in China and the risk of financial meltdown there, and also what foreign investors can do to mitigate that risk. I hope you enjoy the content. Let's talk about strong team. I think what's very important is to understand why would you want to have a foreign national or someone from headquarters anyway?
I would assume it's preserving the company DNA.
Yes, it's a very important point. It's governance.
Yeah.
You need to understand when, for example, American companies are particularly exposed to that, they are sometimes subject to American laws. Mm-hmm. The most famous one is the so-called FCPA, meaning Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. These laws also apply under certain circumstances to American companies, even if they operate outside of the United States. And that has a huge implication. If you are exposed to very restrictive legislation, and you need to make sure that you are compliant with these laws.
Yeah.
Some companies paid a very high price for that. Also, foreign European companies. Mm-hmm. For example, bribery of governmental officials is prohibited under Chinese law, but also under this American law.
Yeah.
Some companies violated that law, and they were punished badly in the United States.
Yeah.
Although they were operating in China. I don't want to go into the details of that law. There are specialized lawyers for that. But what it means, a company now needs to make sure it's compliant. It is part of governance.
Yeah.
The other thing is profitability and protection of your IP and your assets on the ground. These were reasons to say, who could we send? Maybe someone who doesn't know the market very well.
Yeah.
But knows our culture, knows our obligations towards legislators.
Yes.
Because not only the Americans have such laws, the British have that now, the French, the Germans, the Japanese. So all kinds of legislation that unfolds globally forces companies to invest more in management, in governance.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly need someone who has a different skill set.
Yeah, governance, meaning control.
Means control, means management, means control.
So in order to maintain control over a subsidiary that is so far away, wouldn't you want someone whose interest is aligned with headquarters? How do you guarantee that a local management person would have that shared interest with headquarters? Someone from a totally different culture.
Yeah, I think
and different business environments.
This is a very good point, and this is the core of the issue. Generally worldwide, but in China pronounced, you have the conflict, it's called the principal agent conflict, meaning you have an owner of a business and you have someone who has power over what's going on.
Yeah.
So you have an employed manager and you have a shareholder. If you are a family business, that's the same, very often.
Yeah.
But big international operating entities operate differently. Companies. They have shareholders, they have a management headquarters, and then they have China.
Yeah.
So it goes normal way from the owners of the business. And incentivizing a manager to think like an owner is a key challenge everywhere. But in China, is a particularly, I would say, significant or big problem.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you're a local manager, local GM, you run a China business, you have no incentive to produce dividends every year that you then send back to headquarters because net liquidity is gone. You cannot invest it anymore. So you try
anyway, the dividend doesn't go into your own pocket.
Absolutely. So that's true.
Why make the extra effort to make sure that the business is in China, it's actually creating dividend?
So,
what for? It makes my work much harder, and I don't get any share from it.
Yes. So there are
What's in it
various,
for me?
there are various incentive schemes to make sure
Yeah.
a GM, for example, things in that direction.
And there's so many other way a GM in China can pocket some of the extra income.
Now we're going into a very dark side of business operating, but I think it's important. Everybody who
Okay,
works-
then we'll leave the dark side for another time.
No, we don't leave the dark side for another. We leave it. Everybody who worked in China for a long time knows the issue, and that, by the way, Western countries have the same challenge decades ago. For example, how do you make sure that your procurement team doesn't cooperate with a supplier, or that your management team doesn't cooperate with distributors?
Corporate, you mean?
Kickbacks payment.
Yeah. Okay.
They are not allowed. They are not allowed under US law. They're not allowed under Chinese law. But the point is, you need controls, internal controls,
Yeah.
to prevent this from happening. Western companies went through a learning curve.
Yeah.
They had the same issues. But there are two fundamental differences compared to China. First, you have a different legal system.
Okay.
So let's say the US, I take the US as an example, but we could also say England or Germany or France.
Yeah.
If someone suspects something is wrong, you can go to a court. The courts are independent.
Yeah.
They will investigate, and they have enormous powers. And they will investigate,
Yeah.
and they will make you accountable. So
So there are consequences for behaving
the risk
poorly.
is high. The risk is high that you get caught. This is number one.
Yeah.
And there were too many checks and balances. For example, it's not only the auditor, the tax authorities go there. Then there are social security authorities, the labor bureau. For example, in Germany, this is very strict. There are all kinds of other, I would take governmental entities that have a look into the company. There are databases. There's so much data. There is so much transparency.
Transparency.
That it is very, very. You can do things. You can try to cooperate with your supplier. Say, sell a little bit more expensive to us, but you give me a little bit of the margin you're making.
Yeah.
But the systems in Western countries are far more sophisticated. There's enormous data flowing.
Yeah.
And in China, you do not have independent courts. The courts are here to decide about cases, but the legal culture has developed in China over the last 30 years, and certainly in the right direction, but it is not the legal culture that the Europeans, the Western countries have for hundreds of years.
I see.
And the courts are not independent. When in the profession that investigates, let's say, irregularities, I call it, they say there are two items, some say three items, but the two most important items that cause embezzlement, for example, of company funds, an opportunity and pressure. So I remember when I worked for a big four brand for over 20 years. I remember we got training.
Yeah.
And I remember we got a training, and in that video there was a former FBI director. And,
FBI director.
yeah, and we had
Big shot.
very interesting. And there was someone who was sentenced to prison, I think, for 5 years. Yeah, he committed accounting fraud.
Okay.
So he was talking about his experience, and he said he had money issues, financial pressure, and he realized very quickly that the company was not really checking what he was doing.
So there was an opportunity.
There was an opportunity, and there was pressure.
Yeah.
So what you do, you say, okay, let's go for it. Some people say just because people might watch this, there is an association, Certified Fraud Examiners. It's an association, and they have the so-called, or they call it the fraud triangle, and they add the third component, the justification. Justification means the person who commits something and says, well, the other people do that, so I do it.
So they feel justified to actually commit a fraud.
I always say that might be the case, but it's not so relevant. And it's a thing that I think applies to Western societies, Christianized societies. But look at the situation in China, where costs increase for everyone. China is a very tough society for people to perform.
Yeah.
Men are expected to have an apartment.
Yeah.
And by the way, an apartment in Shanghai, we're talking about easily $2 million.
Yeah, it's insane.
I don't know in this building, this is an office building, I think, but let's say this was a residential building. I think an apartment would easily cost 2 to 3 million.
Yeah.
So the prices are, I mean, even New York could be considered reasonable. Yeah. So, or London. So there's an enormous pressure because society expects a lot.
Yeah. So there's a constant pressure.
And then you have authority over a foreign company that operates in China
Yeah.
that has very limited access to what you're doing, doesn't understand the language.
Yeah.
Now there's legislation about data transfer, they're very much restricted.
Mm-hmm.
So that provides a very, very fertile ground for opportunities.
We have established that China is becoming less attractive for a Western executive,
Yeah.
right? And the costs are higher for headquarters to hire such talents.
Yes.
What should headquarters do